Gentlemen, the captain.
Good evening, just now.
Good evening, sir, ladies and gentlemen. Maritime operations, please.
So Blue Maritime, Ark Royal in the centre of the Adriatic, having conducted the RAS with Orange Leaf, is now opening to the north. Fort Austin remains at anchor off Bari for airhead ops, and Brave Sir sailed Naples this morning en route to the Adriatic. The Americans update George Washington, which I think we met earlier this afternoon, just to the east of us. The Kalamazoo, who's razzed the George Washington, and the Bainbridge, who's now transiting off station. The TS Gates has relieved her as a Ticonderoga, so an area Maverick. Otherwise, so very little change with 440 units.
Good, thank you.
The Bosnian Serbs seem to have decided to bring the Muslim attack, which is going on in this area here along Route Duck, to the attention of the media. It's basically a small offensive that's been going on for about 3 weeks, and the Serbs are making a clear propaganda attempt to point out Muslim non-compliance with the cessation of hostilities agreement, and the Serbs have indeed threatened to counterattack against the BIH in that area.
Air engineering, please, sir.
Good evening, sir. Tonight's aircraft state. Of the 6 Harriers we have here, 4 serviceable at the moment. 04, now we've finished the last denied flight power up. We're trying to improve the performance of the radar warning receiver, which has been degraded of late, so that's in the hangar and will be up fine tomorrow. And 01, we're waiting for the bits to come in. Quite a few of them we're expecting in tomorrow. When we get up with Fort Austin on the RAS. Onto our helicopters, 2 back now, so we're up to 5 Sea King Js, 3 serviceable, working down from the top. 10 came back today, we're doing some flex ops on it, having been away for a few days. 11 is up now doing a check test flight on its Doppler, and a piece from the radars in the workshops being repaired at the moment. The other 3 are serviceable, but we'll be changing a sonar cable on 15 overnight, where we've found a problem with that.
Public relations, please, sir.
Good evening, sir. Very successful PR day today, with the courtesy of Ops this morning, an early arrival of the team, allowing airborne shots of the ship and the Harrier takeoff. After saying hello to you this morning, sir, the crew then filmed the Hilo and Harrier recoveries from O2 deck. They interviewed Commander Air and Flyco, and squeezed in just before lunch the recovery of the 845, seeping from Split.
Ops, please.
Tomorrow morning, sir, relatively busy day. Mackie breaks tomorrow morning between 5:30 and 6:30. Flying stations at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. SOX at 7:25. Command update at 8:15. Stand mast being rigged between 9 and 10 in readiness for the RAS S tomorrow afternoon. And then some internal training, switchboard drills, comms training, and support operator, and MBCD circuit training tomorrow morning.
Just a few points from me, sir. Very good day on VIP visits today. They've rescheduled the Mr. Bett and his independent review team, and that looks like being 16th to 17th of August for ARK only. And of course that's very good news because he's quite important to our future.
What the future holds for Ark Royal is unknown, but it is through her glorious past that the legend has grown. Today's Ark is the 5th ship to bear the name, which after 4 centuries still holds pride of place in the Royal Navy. The first Ark Royal was built in 1586 at the Royal Dockyard in Deptford. Originally called the Ark Raleigh after its owner, Sir Walter Raleigh, this 38-gun ship was later bought by the government. As the flagship of Lord Howard of Effingham, it was used against the Spanish Armada in 1588. It was over 3 centuries later that Ark II was launched, thus becoming the world's first purpose-built aircraft carrier.
When the Admiralty started to get interested in aviation, they did some trials with HMS Hermes in 1913, and that convinced them that they needed a specialized aviation support ship. They made a provision in the 1914-15 naval estimates for £81,000 to provide this aviation support ship. The ship itself was a merchantman that was just in the process of being laid down as frames in Blyth in Northumberland. That was bought, totally redesigned, because the ship we're talking about, Ark Royal II, was the first ship designed and built as an aviation support ship specially. That ship was bought, converted during 1914, and in December 1914 was commissioned into the Royal Navy as their first, and in fact the world's first, specialised aviation support ship. ARK Royal II was a seaplane carrier, not an aircraft carrier as we would know it today. It carried seaplanes. It in fact had a few land planes on it, but it couldn't fly them off. There were no provisions for that. And the seaplanes were carried in what was known at that time as the aeroplane hold, what we now call the hangar deck, and they had to be hoisted in and out of the water by two rather quaint coffee pot steam cranes mounted either side of the ship just above the hold. There was a mixture of aircraft throughout the First World War experience of ARK Royal II, mainly short seaplanes of one type or another, plus one or two other sort of slightly exotic and generally inefficient aeroplanes whose inability for their planned use, for instance in the Dardanelles, where ARK Royal spent much of its time during World War I, in those climatic conditions, wooden aircraft with floats which swelled with water, which provided drag and weight. The efficiency of the aircraft that ARK Royal could put into the air was nowhere near what we would expect today. When the Dardanelles campaign was planned, ARK Royal was sent out there to use what aircraft she had to do things like spot for naval gunfire, to look for Turkish minefields, to carry out reconnaissance over enemy territory. She went out in February 1915, and in fact, the day she arrived in the Aegean, had an aircraft up in the evening, which came back with, I think it was 7 bullet holes in it, but also reporting that they dropped the first bomb on enemy territory. Things, I think one could say, perhaps got a little bit more difficult after that. Even the best of the aircraft that ARK Royal had in that era had something like 60% of engine failures during its flights. And it was a case, if you like, of ambition actually exceeding ability, but it was very important to the development of aircraft and aircraft carriers in the Royal Navy that this mobile airfield, which went round from Gallipoli to Salonika, back to Gallipoli, other times in the Mediterranean, we were actually starting to see the development of naval air power on this floating airfield. After ARK Royal II had been in reserve for some years, the Navy was starting to get interested again in aircraft catapults, something that they'd experimented with, in fact, as early as 1917. But then that had been left on one side. So around 1930, ARK Royal II was taken out of reserve and fitted with a catapult over the bow, and was used then as a catapult seaplane and pilot training ship for several years. When the Second World War started and convoy escort became a problem, in particular the problem of getting aircraft to attack shadowing things like Focke-Wulf Condors, for instance, we came up, as we do in Britain very often, with a good old Heath-Robinson solution of bolting catapults on the bows of ships and putting 1 or 2 aircraft on the ship to be fired from the catapult, one-way journey if necessary, the pilot ditching by his ship at the end of his fuel or flight. And Pegasus was in fact used as the prototype fighter catapult ship, or FCS as they were known. Because she had a hangar, she could carry perhaps 3 Fairey Fulmar fighters, and this by now quite venerable ship did 3 convoy escorts with its Fairey Fulmar fighters, and that was her last major operational service. But that wasn't the end of her. She was paid off into reserve again about 1944, was actually sold back into mercantile life in 1946, but never fully converted back to a merchantman, and was scrapped in 1950, a life of almost 40 years.
I joined the Navy as a boy seaman in 1936, and I commissioned HMS ARK Royal, the third, in December 1938. We were assigned to the Mediterranean for our spring cruise in January of 1939, and we were then asked by Captain Paz to prepare the ship for war, because his commissioning speech, which he gave on commissioning the Ark Royal at Spithead in 1939, stated that he would not rest until Hitler had put a bloody price upon this ship's head. It was a modern ship, the Ark was, and you know, a bit of modern stuff about it. The mess decks were, you know, the stalls were all padded and all that kind of thing, and all hammocks, no bunks, only officers were in bunks. Well, we had a slinger, hammocks, and of course they used those hammocks if necessary for damage control, so that'd be lashed up correctly. One turn for every day of the week in a hammock, and it's so many inches apart. But Arthur J was a man who made that ship. He was a man, Commander Eccles and Captain Power. He became an admiral of the fleet eventually. I used to get on with Arthur J when he was an admiral. He used to come up and put his arm around me, you know, as an admiral. Oh, he was quite a boy. Quite a boy, old Arthur J. If you'd been on the Ark Royal with him, you were made. You were really made.
Early in the war, Ark Royal was detached from the home fleet to patrol the western approaches. One of her skuas claimed the fleet air arm's first kill of the war when a Dornier flying boat was shot down on the 25th of September, 1939. The same year, she went to the South Atlantic as part of the force hunting the Graf Spee. Although many miles away at the time, there is no doubt that her imagined arrival influenced Hitler's decision to scuttle this great German pocket battleship. In April 1940, Ark Royal was sent to Norway to cover the ill-fated Narvik operation. Despite the icy Scandinavian weather and the unsuccessful attack by her skuas on Scharnhorst, she returned from Norway with a considerable reputation. Almost immediately, she was attached to Vice Admiral Somerville's Force H, gathering in the Mediterranean.
One specific action that you won't hear a lot about and is not mentioned on our battle honours is the unfortunate episode of Mers el-Kabir and Oran. In July 1940, the French forces had capitulated, and the vast bulk of their naval forces made it for the ports of Oran and Mers el-Kabir. Now, there was some concern, particularly with Churchill, that these forces could end up fighting with the Axis side against us. So something had to be done. So an ultimatum was given to the French that they could either sail their forces for the West Indies, they could sail with reduced crews to the UK, or they could join the Allied forces, the British forces, or they would have to scuttle. Negotiations continued, but they broke down, and Admiral Somerville was put in probably the most unpleasant situation of his career when he had to order his forces to take out the French battleships and cruisers, and so they opened fire. Ark Royal was, of course, involved in this. Her aircraft, her Swordfish aircraft, chased the French ship Strasbourg, which was able to get away, but then the aircraft were able to eventually catch and sink the ship of the same class, the Dunkirk, as well as which Ark Royal's aircraft were involved in spotting for the artillery. On the 27th of November 1940, midway between Sardinia and Cape Spartivento, an action took place between a group of Italian battleships and cruisers which was attempting at the time to intercept the Malta resupply convoys. Well, Admiral Somerville's Force H got wise of this and attempted to intercept. Firstly, a torpedo Swordfish bomber from HMS ARK ROYAL launched an attack which was not successful, and then eventually the British battleships engaged, but the Italians decided that they would, as they did so often on these occasions, that they were going to live and fight another day. So they sailed away, and the action, for which we are accredited with a battle honour, was fairly inconclusive.
In May 1941, Ark Royal sailed from Gibraltar to intercept the Bismarck, pride of the German Navy. Already slowed by a torpedo strike from Swordfish off HMS Victorious, Bismarck was making a dash for the port of Brest. On the morning of the 26th of May, 15 Swordfish from ARK ROYAL attacked HMS Sheffield, mistaking her for their target in the bad weather.
It was amazing because some of the squadrons that we sent out to attack the Bismarck had to return because they couldn't find her at first. And when they came back, they decided to land on the aircraft with it still, because all the torpedoes were primed. I saw a feat of flying by the fleet arm that I don't think I'll ever witness again. That aircraft carrier was going up and down like this in the Bay of Biscay. And they were flying on and off aircraft with torpedoes under them. And they were still flying them back on.
Potentially tragic, the attack proved beneficial. ARK ROYAL's Swordfish were now armed with torpedoes fitted with contact detonators for the next strike. This time, the aircraft made no mistake. Flying at low speed through the curtain of anti-aircraft fire, 2 hits were registered on Bismarck. One of the torpedoes wrecked the rudder and made Bismarck impossible to steer. This classic sea duel finally ended the next day, when Bismarck was sunk by ships of the home fleet. ARK ROYAL returned to the Mediterranean to continue her task of resupplying Malta. By this time, ARK ROYAL skewers had been replaced by Fairey Fulmars. The Blackburn skewer had only been in service since 1938. Despite gaining a reputation as a rugged naval aircraft, the skewer had been a failure in combat. Designed as a fighter reconnaissance dive bomber, it proved too slow and too big to fulfill any of these roles properly.
We were convoying, various convoys. We were picking up convoys and taking them on to Malta. Only about just over almost till we got to the Sicilian Straits, and then we used to leave them and they used to go through at night. We used to turn back. We used to go as far as Galita Island, a place called like Galita Island. And then we used to, of course, we used to all have our aircraft flying around as well. And like the skewer, always on hand, and of course the Swordfish. They used to be on reconnaissance. Well, I mean, we went up there and we bombarded Genoa, and it was on a Sunday morning, and we went up there with the battleship Malaya and the battle cruiser Renown with Somerville on board, and the ARK ROYAL and the cruiser Sheffield. And 7 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, and it was a beautiful sunny day, blue sky. It was on a Sunday morning, and there was an oil tanker going up to this harbour in Genoa, and the Sheffield let fly, and it blew the tanker to places. And then the pilot was assigned. I spoke to him after he came back, and he was in a Swordfish, and he was spotting for the heavy guns like the Malaya and the Renown 15-inch. He said, I never want to do that again. I said, why? He said, well, they were all going to mass, he said. All going to the mass Sunday morning, you see. All going to mass, all going to. At the same time, they were bombing Liverpool and Leghorn with Swordfish. And he came back, and this particular pilot, and I said, well, what was it like? He said, well, he said, I bombed the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He said, but I didn't stop to see if it was leaning anymore. Things like that, yes, true.
ARK ROYAL's luck finally ran out on the 13th of November, 1941. The legend had grown, and she had become a symbol of the British refusal to accept defeat. Germany had even claimed her sunk on a number of occasions during propaganda broadcasts. She was attacked and torpedoed by U-boat U-81, just 50 miles from Gibraltar, on her return from a supply run to Malta.
And we were at cruising stations then, because we were about to go into Gibraltar. And Somerville decided to do a throw-off ship at the Malaya, battleship Malaya, a 15-inch throw-off ship. And this submarine came out of Spanish territorial waters, Wingus. And there was a spray, suddenly went up like that. And that was it. And then she started to list very quickly. She listed over very quickly and then settled. And there was about 5 Swordfish that needed to be lashed down by ropes forward, so they lashed them down before they went over the side. that a certain amount of the crew were asked to stay behind, and the remainder went on to the Legion, who came alongside to pick up survivors after the order to abandon ship was given. She didn't have any longitudinal bulkheads below the water level. Each compartment went from port to starboard, if you can see. But she had no bulkheads dividing, and that's why the water seeped up through. When on the side we got hit, went into the funnel casing, and you know, a terrific split. She had about 120-foot split with one torpedo.
Despite attempts to tow her to safety, a heavy list and an uncontrolled fire in the port boiler room resulted in the ship being abandoned.
A great Merseyside welcome was awaiting Her Majesty the Queen as she arrived at Camel Laird Shipyard, Birkenhead, to launch the Royal Navy's latest aircraft carrier and to give her a proud name, ARK ROYAL. In the shadow of the carrier's huge hull, final preparations were being made by the workers, many of whom had helped to build the previous ARK ROYAL, launched in 1937 from the same yard. In a place of honor were members of the crew of the late and great ARK ROYAL, still with their memories of 1941, when she met her fate in the Mediterranean after long braving the worst the Luftwaffe could do. And now, the name that became a legend of World War II was about to live again. Her Majesty walked to the launching platform amid the cheers of 50,000 spectators. All was in readiness for the King's ship to receive her name from the Queen.
I name this ship ARK ROYAL. May God protect her and all who sail in her.
ARK ROYAL was the first British carrier to be fitted with the new steam catapult. Designed by Commander Mitchell, the steam catapult used a piston driven by steam from the ship's boilers. Its introduction revolutionized the launch process, and for the first time, it meant that aircraft could take off while the carrier was at anchor. The Hawker Seahawk first flew in 1947, designated as the P1040. Originally designed to vie for a Royal Air Force contract, it took a further year to equip it for the requirements of the Fleet Air Arm. The first frontline squadrons were supplied in 1953, and they provided sterling service at the Suez Crisis in 1956, holding their own against the MiG-15s of the Egyptian Air Force. 800, 804, and 898 squadrons all flew Seahawks off ARK ROYAL in the mid-50s, providing an important slice of her firepower. In 1958, ARK ROYAL went in for her first refit. From 1959, she carried Supermarine Scimitars and the new de Havilland Sea Vixen. The Scimitar was the first aircraft within the Fleet Air Arm to have a nuclear capability and was a significant advance on the Seahawk. Designed as an interceptor, the Scimitar took on the role of low-level tactical bomber. The Sea Vixen greatly enhanced the Fleet Air Arm's ability to protect the fleet, as it was faster than the old Sea Venom and had an all-missile armament. Scimitars and Sea Vixens served on ARK ROYAL until her second major refit in 1967. Her port deck edge was extended, and a new midships catapult fitted to allow her to operate Phantoms as well as Buccaneers and Gannets.
The range director then marshals a phantom out to go after the Gallet on the waistcat. Thousands of pounds of fuel burning away behind, so it's got to be a slick operation. Second engine winds up. Chock men hang on for dear life during power checks. Fire suit men stand by. The crew's clear. FDO winding up to take off power. Full power, green from Flyco. Go. Back into the seat and away. All good. Thumbs up.
The steam catapult is a great advance on earlier catapults, and the ride that you get is very smooth. And you're advised to put your head back before you're fired off, because if you don't, you're liable to bang it on the headrest. But this sort of things happen on the smoothest of catapults. Taking off and landing from an aircraft carrier is a very exhilarating experience. It is far less difficult than people think it is. The Buccaneer in particular, when you're launched from the carrier, you're launched hands-off. That means that you have in fact got your left hand holding the throttles forward to make sure that they won't come back with the force of going down the catapult. With your right hand, you're not touching the stick at all. The aeroplane is properly trimmed, and you just leave your right hand on your knee. And after you've been launched, then with no great hurry, you just take over the aeroplane and fly it away.
However, not all pilots always found it so easy.
As far as landing the aeroplane is concerned, again, people think it looks frightfully difficult. It's nothing like as difficult as it appears. You are interested in three specific aspects. One is speed, one is the centerline, and the other is the glide slope. The centerline is quite easy to see because it's painted down the center of the flight deck, and usually in day-glow red. The speed is easy to see because the airspeed indicator is specifically placed up on the coaming where you can see it out of the corner of your eye. As far as the glide slope is concerned, there's what started life as a mirror sight, where a light was shone into a mirror which reflected back towards the pilot, and halfway up the mirror in either side were a row of green lights.
Shifting slightly left. Dropping slightly low now. Little power. Roger, and hold that action. Okay, got it.
In a normal squadron, you would have, in our Navy, 14 airplanes. Typically, two of those would be configured as air-to-air refueling tankers, and one would be configured in the photographic role, and the rest would be configured in the weapons role for whatever weapons you wanted. And the squadrons would be required to become proficient in everything up to a certain standard. Then you would further specialize pilots and observers to being particularly good at certain roles that you thought you would be needing in the theatre to which you were sent. Because one of the functions of an aircraft carrier is that it's carrying a whole airfield with it, and it has a fighter squadron on board, and it has an anti-submarine helicopter squadron on board, and it has this strike capability. And so it is carrying with it an ability to establish air superiority in its own environment. They're very complete systems, which is why the Eastern Bloc took such a tremendous interest in them, because they were worried by them, and understandably, I think. And the American carriers, of course, are twice as big as the ones which we had, and they are formidable machines.
Okay, come port 040, wind 290, 38. 22070. That's the enemy radar. Down you go. Okay, standard under the lobe descent. Fine. Passing 25,000. You've got the altimeter setting, haven't you? Yep, 1009, isn't it? That's it. Passing 1,000 feet. Check. Okay, low level now, increasing. Roger, come starboard 045. Steady 045. I've got the landfall. Starboard 047. Roger, 047. Visual. You see the fjord? Yep, quite happy. About 10 miles to target.
To have a force in being just over the horizon catches the attention of potential troublemakers. And so when you're looking at how well an aircraft carrier does with its Buccaneers and Phantoms, or Buccaneers and Vixens, depending on which time scale you're looking at, how well is that doing in a particular theatre? It's difficult to judge sometimes, because I know for a fact that on 3 separate occasions when I was involved in an aircraft carrier, and in my Buccaneer days, we were moved to places where something was going to happen, and when we turned up, it didn't happen. And so, in terms of preventing small conflicts, or which could quickly escalate into bigger conflicts, they're exceedingly useful. So when you can produce this amount of power quickly on somebody's doorstep when they're about to make trouble which is going to upset the stability of the international scene, aircraft carriers are extremely useful. And I think that the combination of Phantoms and Buccaneers and anti-submarine helicopters that we had helped in many instances to keep the peace. In fact, HMS ARK ROYAL, she never fired a shot in anger, but she was in the right place at the right time, preventing a lot of things, undesirable things from happening, and preventing quite a lot of brush fire wars from escalating into destabilizing arrangements for the rest of the world.
Okay, I see the lakes. I've got the target. Here we go. Bomb selected. Roger. The dive was about right. Seemed quite reasonable. We'll have to horse it around a bit in here. Okay then, back down the fjord.
One of the times when the Buccaneer was very useful with its long legs was in Belize. The Ark Royal was over 500 miles away, but it was essential because the bad guys were beginning to flex their muscles. It was essential to calm things down, and so 4 buccaneers were flown off from the Ark Royal. 2 of them were tankers and 2 of them were in the ground attack role, and they refueled on the way out, and the tankers came back and landed back on board and refueled themselves on board, and they were then launched again to meet the 2 buccaneers on their way back. But by having those buccaneers visibly flying over Belize, it demonstrated that there was an aircraft carrier not very far away. And in fact, it was a long way away, but the effect that it had was exactly what was hoped for, and the trouble ceased. And the carrier was in fact within easy range the following day, by which time the trouble had gone away. But the effect of those 2 aeroplanes flying that distance and appearing at the scene of operations did work very well.
In 1973, as the future for aircraft carriers became uncertain, it was decided to extend the life of Ark Royal. The people of Leeds immediately conferred freedom of their city on the ship. One of Ark Royal's last acts was as flagship for the Commander-in-Chief at the Naval Review for the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977. Despite determined efforts to preserve her, the Ark Royal was finally decommissioned in 1978. The pride of the Ark Royal name had been continued for 23 years. Almost immediately, a new carrier bearing the name had her keel laid at the Wall's End shipyard of Swan Hunter. The 5th and current Ark Royal is one of a new class of radically designed carrier known as a through-deck cruiser. Along with HMS Illustrious and HMS Invincible, it is a smaller, more economical ship to run, yet capable of operating the powerful V-STOL aircraft, the Sea Harrier. But it was not the first Ark Royal to host this aircraft. In 1963, trials were conducted on Ark 4, marking the first deck landing of a Harrier, an event which was celebrated 25 years later when Bill Bedford flew in a Sea Harrier onto the deck of Ark 5. As chief test pilot for Hawker Aircraft, Bill had been involved in all the trials for the new Harrier, and it was only fitting he should commemorate the event.
How did it compare to 25 years ago?
Well, a lot more performance now, more complicated cockpit, but the fundamentals are still the same. You still maintain attitude on the stick, heading on the rudder, height on the throttle with one extra nozzle in the cockpit. So the basics are the same. When we landed aboard, Flag Officer Aircraft Carrier said in 1963, the thing that impressed me most was the complete absence of fright on the part of the spectators. Normally new airplanes come on board bigger, heavier and faster, and here was a reversal of the trend. Very valid comment too.
Was there a complete absence of fright on your part on that occasion?
Yeah, it's fairly relaxed from my point of view. Lots of comments made about you'll buckle the deck, you'll deafen the captain and you'll blow the crew overboard, but nothing dramatic like that happened.
The revolutionary Sea Harrier is the pioneer of a new generation of V-STOL aircraft and proved itself in the Falklands, flying off HMS Invincible. It has shown itself to be a much more suitable aircraft for naval operations than the original land Harrier, and has continued to serve the fleet on board Ark Royal since 1985.
Well, the Ark Royal is more than just an aircraft carrier. She is, in fact, a communications platform, a centre for intelligence, is a command and control platform. So in addition to flying a whole range of aircraft, we are in a position to command the fleet. I joined the Navy about 30 years ago as a seaman officer, and wisely, I like to think, elected to go flying. So I then took up helicopters. In fact, I flew as a helicopter in the previous helicopter pilot in the previous Ark Royal, and I've graduated through frigates and destroyers, and here I am in the biggest ship in the Royal Navy. You would be very surprised for me to say that Ark Royal was anything other than outstanding at the job that she does. But I have to be honest and say that there are so many people here and such sophisticated equipment all being brought together that it is a very outstanding command and control platform.
Ark Royal is the largest ship in the Royal Navy. We're about 21,000 tons, 209 metres long, 36 metres wide at our widest, and at the waterline about 27.5 metres wide. So we're very big. We're a small town of 1,150 people, sometimes goes up to 1,200, sometimes a bit less than that. So it's a big floating hotel. It's a 3-star hotel. The supply officer would say a 5-star hotel, but I always tell them it's a 3-star hotel, which I push through the water at 30 knots. To propel us through the water, we've got 4 marine gas turbine engines, 25,000 horsepower each, and we can run those in a variety of configurations, 1 engine, 2 engines, 3 engines, or indeed 4 engines, and particularly in benign conditions like this, when we need a lot of wind over the deck to get the Harriers off, then we need all 4 engines, and indeed may need as much as 30 knots. Those engines are pretty thirsty beasts. They use about 22 tons of fuel an hour at maximum power. So in road parlance terms, that's about 1 fuel tanker an hour. But we don't often do full power. And for a Harrier launch, for example, we only will need that for perhaps 10 minutes. And then it's back down to the frugal efficiency of 1 engine, which can happily push us through the water again at 14 knots. The engines are controlled from the ship control centre, and that's really, in spite of what you may hear from other people, that is really the nerve centre of the ship, and everything, all the running machinery is more or less controlled from there. And that involves everything from the freshwater distilling plants to the main engines that we talked about, to the diesel generators which provide light and power, and the 100 other auxiliary systems which keep this floating hotel running. It's worth talking a little bit about the diesel generators. They're Paxson Valentas, 1.5 megawatts each. And again, we run 3 or 4 of those at all times, which is enough to power a small town. And they're quite impressive in themselves. We have a lot of spare capacity, electrically wise, in the event of action, and action damage, of course, which is our business at the end of the day. We're a war-fighting machine. So that if something gets damaged, we can still supply power to the right place. Can't stay at sea indefinitely, of course, so we do have to take both solids and fluids. Diesel fuel is generally the first thing we run out of, in spite of carrying 3,800 tons. So we replenish liquids with a tanker, and we can take, with 2 replenishing points, we can take up to 1,200 tons of fuel an hour, which is a pretty staggering statistic, I always think. And aviation fuel as well, we can take that at the same time. And then we do a thing called a replenishment of solids. We carry rather more endurance with food, dry food and frozen food, and we use a thing called a jack-stay transfer, which involves passing a line between the store ship and ourselves, or in our case, being an aircraft carrier, 2 lines. We have 2 points for replenishment, and we pass across the stores that way. Also, with lots of aircraft at our disposal, we use helicopters in a system called the VERTREP, the vertical replenishment, and they add into they reduce the length of time for replenishment by carrying the stores across in underslung loads. One of my other jobs, apart from being the Marine Engineer Officer, is I'm the head of the ship's firefighting organisation, and quite honestly that is the biggest threat that we face in peacetime. We carry a lot of fuel, a lot of ammunition, and a lot of high-power electrical equipment. We still have smokers on board, so the whole package really is a fairly dangerous environment for fire. So we have a highly trained fire brigade on board, of which I'm the head, of about 70 people. That's our normal sort of brigade, if you like, all with different jobs and all highly trained specialists. So that should we have a fire right now, they all know what to do.
You hear there? This is HQ1. Fire, fire, fire. Fire in the ops room at 5 kilo. Attack party muster at the scene of the fire. Support party muster at FRPP 2-1 at 5 Lima Port. Containment party muster at section base 3. Air emergency party muster at FRPP 4-1 at 4 Charlie Port. Establish the BA dump in 5 Lima Junior Rates Dining Hall. Standing C first aid party, close up at the sick bay. What have you got so far?
Established boundary cooling at starboard port, the command planning room office and ETU, and the vents on say port and starboard. Forward with a VUE chef.
Now that of course requires constant training, not just for the specialists but across the board for the whole ship's company, because every man has got to be, and woman of course, has got to be a trained firefighter. And so that involves a variety of exercises and training scenarios, such as putting people into thick smoke using breathing apparatus, escaping from thick smoke using emergency life support apparatus, damage control, shoring timbers, softwood wedges, and so on and so forth. In addition to all of that, of course, we need a number of first aid trained people on board, and we generally aim for 10% of the ship's company are properly first aid trained. And again, that involves a lot of training to keep 10%, so we need 120 of proper first aiders on board at any one time. And that's really just to give us the first aid action in the event of actual damage or casualties, or indeed in a peacetime sort of incident with a fire or a flood where people might get hurt.
Leading Steward Jones, first aid to his face in a candle check.
He's been in a smoke-filled environment. We've got to check his airways are clear and make sure he's breathing properly.
Ark Royal is in a way like a small town. We have 1,200 people on board, and we cover every job that you can imagine in a town. Everything from the hospital to a bakery to a post office to policemen. But of course the focus point of it all has to be the warfare aspects, those who control the air battle, which of course we're specialists in, those who maintain the aircraft and those who fly them.
FlyCo is a shortened version of flying control, and I think that almost explains exactly what it is. It more concerns the local circuit, that's aircraft flying in the vicinity of the close to the carrier, and also the control of the aircraft on the deck. As you can imagine, Ark Royal is a fairly small deck, fairly small ship in carrier terms, and we try to get as many aircraft on it as we can to make it more efficient. Therefore, you can see that it needs to be very carefully controlled which aircraft's on deck, which aircraft's on which spot, who's flying in the local circuit. And this is exactly what this place does. All the information, the communications you'll see here, all focused through flying control. The whole operation as a whole is conducted from the lower air operations room, but exercising that plan and the control of the aircraft is through here. So you can find yourself in a situation of having pilots on deck, and for example we use Harriers, as we are at the moment just about to start a launch sequence. The Harriers will be on deck and they'll be talking to flight control here, FlyCo, through the telecommunications, telebrief we call it. So that's by landline to all intents and purposes, telephone. And all the other helicopters that would be on the spots at the same time would all be talking. You can use that same system to talk to the operations room to get navigation updates, and similarly with tactical information. We man the radios here, and the radios for controlling the local circuit. That's the aircraft coming to and from the carrier. And we can also listen out to what's going on every other frequency we're using. That's going to be important as far as the air war is concerned. So the idea here is to keep a picture. We have two people working watch and watch about, both lieutenant commanders. Lieutenant Commander flying, who's my deputy, and his deputy, if you like, Deputy Lieutenant Commander flying. They run the day-to-day business of control flying operations on the deck, working in conjunction with the aircraft control room officer who works down on the deck and the flight deck officer who's on the deck. And they actually physically move the aircraft around on the deck. All those moves have to be controlled from here. The worst situation you could find yourself in is with 3 of the helicopters all on the spots and the Harriers at the back of the flight deck ready to do a launch, and your timing is such that you've got to get the helicopters off before the Harriers can take a run at it, and one of them goes unserviceable. Then a few decisions have to be made, and this is where Lieutenant Commander flying will decide what he's going to do with it. Is it so unserviceable that it can't fly at all? Can he get it folded and pushed away with tractors into one of the other areas of the deck to allow us to launch the jets on time? Or even if one of the jets goes unserviceable, can we get that out of the way so we can get the one behind it there? And of course, we always fly these aircraft to their maximum efficiency. Therefore, they can come back to the carrier, having gone off to do whatever they want to do, with very limited fuel. And if you've got a foul up on the deck and you're trying to get an aircraft back, then you've got some pretty harsh decisions to make.
There are 2 helicopter squadrons in Ark Royal, the first of which is 849 Squadron, equipped with Sea King AEW helicopters. Their primary role, as it suggested, is airborne early warning, equipped with 5 crews total, and this helicopter is very versatile. It also has other roles of anti-surface warfare, but numerous other secondary and tertiary roles. Airborne early warning is basically the detection of low-flying aircraft and missiles in defense of the task force. The other squadron on board is 820 Squadron. They are equipped again with seeking helicopters of a different mark. They are seeking Mark 6s, and their role is anti-submarine warfare. They also have roles in search and rescue, in passenger carrying, carrying stores, and of course, more importantly, to the rest of the ships coming out of carrying mail and bringing the mail on board the ship. They have far more cruisers. They have 6 helicopters on board this ship and 2 helicopters detached to the RFA ships, RFA Fort Grange, and they have approximately 15 crews on board the ship at present. Well, as Seeking is a very forgivable aircraft. It's quite easy to fly when everything's going for you, of course. Has some very nice up-to-date systems. However, the problem, of course, in the skill of every pilot is when these systems go wrong, and it's where the training really tells. The good thing about, of course, aviation in the Royal Navy is that we're always ready to carry out any task that we're asked of us, and particularly having a floating and a moving airfield, we can move the ship around, and when other land-based forces particularly can't fly due to weather, for instance, then we're always there ready to carry out any task that's asked. So that's the best thing, and I think it's well realised that this is one of the great assets of the Fleet Air Arm.
801 Squadron is ARK Royal's Harrier Squadron. We've got 6 Harriers, just over 100 men here to maintain them and arm them. And out here at the moment, we've really got 3 roles. We've got the offensive counter-air role, which is the primary mission for which the aircraft was designed for in the first place. Aside from that, we've got an attack role, and then on top of that, a reconnaissance role. And in fact, the majority of our work out here at the moment is close air support, attack, if you will, and reconnaissance flying. The squadron has 10 pilots, which is the normal number for a squadron with this number of aircraft. And that means that we each get to fly once a day, occasionally twice a day, depending on what the task is. The aircraft, primarily designed as a fighter, so is usually armed with missiles, but it is also multi-role. Although it's small, we can carry missiles, bombs, guns as well. We're also capable of doing air-to-air refueling if we put an air-to-air refueling probe on, which can extend the range and the endurance of the aircraft. So out here particularly, and for literal warfare, you've got a small but very capable aircraft that can meet whatever is required, really. There's no doubt that for a pilot, the Harrier is arguably the ultimate experience. It can go fast, it can drop bombs, it can fire missiles, it can hover, it can do just about anything you would want to do. It's always a challenge. At the end of a tiring sortie, landing back on the ship, particularly in rough weather, can be more difficult than everything else that's come before. So there's never a need to relax or take it easy, because the airplane will bite you if you don't watch out. This ARK Royal differs from all the previous ones in that she's got a ski jump. The ship not being as large as her immediate predecessor, there is a problem with getting aircraft off with a decent payload in terms of fuel and weapons. By putting a ski jump on the front of the ship, you can now get that extra boost by going up the first part of a humpback bridge, if you like, so that by the time the aircraft is starting to fall out of its trajectory, it's gained enough speed to lift the weight that you've just sent off the front wing.
The ski jump was the brainchild of Lieutenant Commander Doug Taylor. And after a year and a half of intensive study, ground trials were carried out at Bedford and Farnborough.
It's worth remembering, 50 years after D-Day's, the anniversary's just passed, and here we are, we've got men, maintainers, pilots, just as prepared, motivated and ready to fight if necessary as they ever were. The training is as important as it ever was. It's important that the machines are as good as they ever were, and it's important to have a ship that can meet those commitments, and Ark Royal certainly does that, I think.
Sortie we're in at the moment, we're in fairly steady regime of flying 4 pairs of Harriers a day, and overlaid on that there are the movements of the helicopters backwards and forwards into Italy and into Split as well. And again, we've got to fiddle with that to make sure they're right. Sometimes on top of that we might have the opportunity to go and take an anti-submarine exercise on, which will mean that we'd be using the helicopters in their primary role, and they would be going away for about 2 hours, then coming back to refuel.
Ark Royal is poised in the Adriatic so that we can provide support to the British Army, which is ashore in Bosnia, aiding the United Nations humanitarian effort. We do this by flying our Sea Harriers over the Bosnia to provide close air support if necessary. Now, we hope that we will not have to drop any bombs, and indeed, in our experience, the very noise and sight of the aircraft coming over the top is sufficient to make people stop firing. But the ship does more than that. It provides the government with some political and diplomatic flexibility in the negotiations which are going on. Here we are poised in international waters. We're beholden to no one. We are, in fact, a go-anywhere airfield, so it doesn't matter where the wind comes from, or if fog comes and prevents them flying from the shore, then we still have the ability to do that from the sea.
On the 16th of April, I was launched as leader of a 2-ship Sea Harrier formation, Vixen 2-3, to go over Bosnia on a close air support, a standard mission over Bosnia. While we were over there, 20 minutes into the sortie, we were tasked by MAGIC, the controlling agency, to contact Fortune 3, who's a forward air controller there, in Gorazda. On doing so, he sounded very worried. The whole city was getting shelled. We could hear shells over the radio. He said that the 2 tanks on the northern ridge were actually carrying out the shelling, and he wanted to investigate and identify the tanks as Serbian tanks, which we did, and we took 3 passes to identify 2 tanks. We then set about a racetrack to do bombing runs. On each of the runs, each 3 first runs, it wasn't possible to drop a bomb because of collateral damage. We couldn't be sure that the bomb wouldn't hurt friendlies or where the bomb would go, basically. So we attempted a 4th pass, which I attempted. Again, the same situation, couldn't really identify the friendlies, so we couldn't drop. Pulled off the target, and going through about 4,000 feet, there was a massive bang and a flash, and the aircraft was upside down. I then gathered my thoughts together after looking at the warning panel. Obviously, the aircraft had been hit by a missile. The aircraft was on fire. I righted the aircraft, so it was right way up, but still descending. And egressed to the southwest, which is the way the forward air controller had told us to go, which is the safe direction. My wingman reported that I'd got a massive fire at the rear end, and the engine had been shut down by myself anyway to try to stop the fire, to no avail. It was then that I decided to eject from the aircraft. On pulling the handle, there's a large bang underneath your seat and a large rush of wind and a blackout as such, I suppose, with the blood rushing from your head. And then the next thing I knew was a huge tug between my legs as the parachute opened, obviously decelerating from 300 knots to 0 knots in about half a second. So it's bound to be quite a tug. It was then all quiet as I floated down in the parachute and landed on in not such a nice style, but it was functional. I got taken to UN headquarters in Gorazda and then flown out by helicopter back to Ark Royal a couple of days later via Sarajevo.
When the Third Ark Royal was sunk in November 1941, fortunately, only one person was killed. Now, the ship's canteen committee decided that what they would like to do is raise enough money to purchase a new silver bell for any other ship that was to bear the name of Ark Royal. And they did this, and its cost was £538, and it was cast in 1943. First of all, it was placed in Lyon Solent until the fourth Ark Royal was launched in 1955. The bell bears the names of all of the captains of the Third Ark Royal, the Fourth Ark Royal, and of course this, the Fifth Ark Royal. It's also inscribed with our battle honours and has a motto underneath it: from those who sailed in the Ark Royal between 1939 and 1941 to those who follow.
People, I'm sure, would imagine that being the captain of a ship like Ark Royal is a tremendous thing to do. It certainly is an amazing privilege. What they perhaps don't appreciate is quite how humbling it is. A captain normally reflects his ship and vice versa. I am the front man, if you like, and I'm always very conscious that I have got some 1,200 people backing me up, and these are tremendous people in their own right, and that in itself is quite humbling. To be the captain of Ark Royal is something rather special. It must be the best known ship in the Royal Navy. It has a great history, 4 ships this century behind it, and naturally each captain of each Ark Royal thinks that his is the best, but we're absolutely certain that this one is.
After completing her deployment in the Adriatic, HMS ARK ROYAL returned to Portsmouth in August 1994, where she was decommissioned, then moved into dry dock for an extensive period of refit. The pride of the Royal Navy returned to active service in 2001, with a special visit from the Queen Mother to rededicate her.
Whereas Her Majesty's ship ARK ROYAL is to be rededicated at Portsmouth on the 22nd of November 2001, or as soon afterwards as circumstances permit, you are to proceed forthwith to prepare for service.
Well, I find that I'm so happy that I'm once again on board ARK ROYAL. You see, I launched her and her predecessor. So it is wonderful to feel that now that she's going to be at sea and guarding our shores just as the days of yore. She is a wonderful ship, and I hope you'll all be very happy in her. And I would like also to give my very best wishes to the ship's company and to those at Versailles who helped so much. And now, Captain Stilson, splice the main brace.
In 2002, American President George Bush was being burned in effigy on the streets of Baghdad, and the threat of America declaring war on Iraq was ever increasing. There was much speculation in Whitehall regarding British involvement in any possible military action.
If military action was to be taken, I mean, in those circumstances, undoubtedly there's a strong case for the House to be recalled.
In this nervous atmosphere, rumours abound, and everything's seen as a sign of preparation. The ARK ROYAL leaves for the Mediterranean in September for exercises in October. The Ministry of Defence and Downing Street today insisted it's simply a long-planned NATO exercise.
Yes, of course, with all of the speculation and a lot of the hype around, you add that to a number of nervous families and a certain amount of uncertainty about what really we will end up doing. Yes, there's quite a lot of nervousness and excitement.
What would you say to a mother who has waved her son off on the ARK ROYAL and knows that it's at least possible that he will not return because you, in the end, conclude that it is right to fight Iraq?
I would never, as British Prime Minister, send British troops to war unless I thought it was necessary.
And indeed, the decision for Britain to go to war was soon made. While on exercise in the Mediterranean, the ARK ROYAL was ordered to set sail for the Gulf in January 2003. On board the Ark was a squadron of early warning Sea King helicopters operating in a surveillance role. On the 22nd of March 2003, while providing essential support for the Royal Marines occupying the Alfor Peninsula, tragedy struck.
We are operating in the northern Arabian Gulf at the moment, and this morning at about 4:15 local time, in full darkness, two of our helicopters sadly and tragically collided in midair some 5 miles away in international waters. The wreckage plummeted, of course, instantly into the sea, and although we had support and help from other ships on the scene within 5 minutes in rescue boats and recovery boats, we've only been able to recover some wreckage now, and I fear very much that there's no hope of any survivors from this accident.
Only 3 of the 7 crew who perished were recovered from the sea. Their bodies were flown off ARK ROYAL on the 28th of March 2003 and repatriated.
20-gun salute at HMS ARK ROYAL, spearhead of Britain's military force in the Gulf, was escorted home by Gulf veteran the destroyer HMS York and by a myriad small boats, a flotilla of affection for perhaps the greatest name in the Royal Navy. 126 days they'd been away, then an inexperienced company of 650 sailors, now a team united by the experience of conflict.
The average age of this ship's company is just 24. There are lots of teenagers on board, 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. This hasn't been just their first war. For many of them, this was their first ship.
Over the centuries, Portsmouth has waved off and welcomed back many a fighting ship. It never seems to have become immune to the emotions of parting and reunion. Along the seafront, the pebble foreshore, the harbour and the dockside, the crowds gathered. It would have been unthinkable had they not. The popularity or otherwise of the conflict was not for discussion here today. Sons and daughters who'd been taken away to do a difficult job for their country were now home.
ARK ROYAL has been the name of carriers, more carriers than any other ship's name in the Royal Navy. And the Fleet Air Arm exists to fly aircraft from aircraft carriers, and in fact now from other types of warship. This exhibition that we built here at the Fleet Air Arm Museum, called Carrier, is a tribute not only to the various ARK ROYALs there have been, but to every aircraft carrying ship that the Royal Navy has had, and the aviators who've operated from them, and the men who've serviced the aircraft that they've flown from there. It's an exhibition the size of 2 football fields in total. We're standing at the moment on our flight deck, but we also include a trip around the ship, and we'll let you see some very high quality, very noisy film of these big jets operating on the aircraft carriers in their era. There's nothing else like it in the world, and we're very proud of it, and we hope that that'll make people come and visit the Fleet Air Arm Museum down here at Yeovilton.